Friends, I welcome all of you to our today's session. In the previous class session, we are learning about various modes of computation of capital gain tax, right? How to compute capital gain that we are learning. After that, we are going to learn how to compute tax on that capital gain. Today, we'll plan to learn that. But before that, let us quickly recapitulate that mode that we have learned. Mode of computation of capital gain we'll be learning. Then we'll shift to rate part. Rates that are applicable to capital gain. Going to share the screen with you right now. Yeah. Modes of computation of capital gain. Broadly, you have already understood this thing. Uh, what is cost of inflation index? I had shown you this index. Right. This is relevant to compute long-term capital gain, where indexation will be there. So, broadly, if you see, we have learned then how to compute short-term capital gain. You have to take the full value of the consideration minus expenditure incurred wholly and exclusively in connection with such transfer. That will be deducted. We will be getting net value of consideration. Therefrom, you have to deduct two more things. One is cost of acquisition and cost of input. And in case of long-term capital gain, so instead of cost of acquisition, cost of improvement, we have to take indexed cost of acquisition and indexed cost of improvement. Is it done? After that only you will be able to compute capital gain. If the capital gain is exempted under some sections, then the exemptions will be applicable. Otherwise, it will be taxable. Similarly, some exemptions are also there for short-term capital gain. This concept we have also understood, and this formula we have seen how to convert cost of acquisition to indexed cost of acquisition. You know it or not? Will you be able to do it? Convert cost of acquisition into indexed cost of acquisition? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So you have to refer to the index number. Okay. So by doing this, by this indexation, what you are doing, you are in fact inflating or increasing the cost of improvement or cost of acquisition. Suppose cost of acquisition was there in the year 2007-8. So you have to divide it by 129, and suppose year of transfer is in the year 2021, multiply it with 301. In this process, cost of acquisition will be increased, it will be enhanced. Is it not? Same also applicable for cost of improvement. But cost of improvement, you have to see only those cost of improvement which have incurred after 1/4/2001, that will be taken into consideration. Is it not? Okay. So first, we need to arrive at the full value of consideration. That means consideration which is received or receivable by transfer of that capital asset. Consideration may be in cash, may be in kind. In some situation, you already know fair market value of asset will be taken as consideration. Okay. Adequacy of consideration is not relevant, but in certain situation, in case of transfer of land and building, stamp duty value is taken. Okay. And whether consideration is received or not, that doesn't matter. Even if consideration is receivable, that will also be taken as consideration. Okay. Then we have to deduct the expenditure which is wholly and exclusively incurred in connection with the transfer. So one has to establish the relationship, whether this expenditure is, one has to establish the relationship between the expenditure and the transfer. If this expenditure is incurred exclusively for the purpose of transfer and it only attributable to transfer, then that expenditure will of course be deducted. This concept we have also seen. Yeah, friends, one more thing we have to keep in mind. Sometimes what happens when you dispose of a capital asset or when you transfer a capital asset, that some situation may happen like this. Assessee might have received some money as advance and which might have been forfeited. This also happens sometimes. Is it not? Meaning, suppose you want to dispose of a capital asset, somebody might have given you the advance, but finally the transaction could not take place. Advance got forfeited. That means you took that advance and you didn't refund it. That may happen. Is it not? If that is the kind of thing, if advance money, whatever is received, then what will happen? That will reduce the cost of acquisition. For example, let us say you have received, you have purchased a land for 20 lakh rupees, but you had earlier negotiated and had received advance money of 2 lakh rupees. Okay, that means your cost of acquisition will now become 18 lakh rupees. Are you getting my point? Yes or no? Are you getting my point?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So advance money has to be reduced. Uh, so, friends, in the previous class also we had discussed in this specific circumstances, then cost of acquisition, that means cost to the previous owner, shall be treated as the cost of acquisition. Isn't it? In case of when the property is transferred as a result of total or partial partition of into a divided family, or when asset is received as gift or will, or when by means of succession, inheritance, and devolution, or when asset is transferred through liquidation process, or when it's transferred through irrevocable transferred to revocable or an irrevocable trust. Okay, revocable means which can be cancelled. Irrevocable means which cannot be cancelled. When it's asset is transferred like this, then asset transferred to holding company, from holding company to subsidiary company, 100% subsidiary company, and vice versa also. Or asset is transferred from amalgamating company to amalgamated Indian company, or from demerged company to resulting Indian company. Okay, or when an individual converts his own property into HUA property. In all these cases, the cost of acquisition will be the cost of acquisition of the previous one. This concept also we had discussed in the previous class. Okay, and cost of improvement, many things are there, but we have to keep few things in mind. Then in case of goodwill, right to manufacture, right to carry on in business, the cost of improvement shall be taken as nil. And for other assets, cost of improvement means cost which are incurred after 1 for 2000. Okay, so any property which the previous owner has acquired before 1 for 2001, the cost of improvement means cost of capital expenditure incurred for making addition or alteration to the capital asset on or after the said date. That means any cost of improvement which has been taken place before 1 for 2001 will not be taken into consideration. Okay. In other cases, you have to take this cost of improvement or cost of addition or alteration as cost of improvement. Other cases means asset acquired on or after 1 for 2001. If it is acquired on or after 2001, then naturally you will be taking the all cost of acquisition. Okay. But here one thing you have to keep in the mind, if some expenditures are deductible, let us say some repair maintenance expenditures you have incurred and you have claimed it as a deduction under the head profit and gains of business and profits, then that cannot be claimed as cost of improvement. So when I say cost of improvement, it does not include any expenditure which is deductible in computing income chargeable under the head income from house property, profit and gains of business or profession, or income from other sources. Meaning only expenditures of capital nature which have actually contributed as an addition or alteration to the capital asset can be claimed as cost of acquisition. Sorry, cost of improvement. Cost of improvement. Okay. Now, friends, next concept. This also we had discussed, that is computation of capital gain in case of depreciable asset. When we are learning about depreciation and tax planning, extensively this has been discussed. And you already know, in case of depreciable asset, there will be always short-term capital gain. Depreciable assets are always short-term capital assets, so consequently there can be short-term capital gain or short-term capital loss. Okay, right? So in case of transfer of depreciable asset, capital gain is taken as short-term capital gain. But this is for other than the assets which are used by a power generating unit eligible for depreciation on straight line basis. You know, power generation units has got an option. They may claim depreciation on straight line basis. So excluding that situation, there will be always short-term capital gain. Okay, how to calculate capital gain in case of depreciable assets? We have to take full value of consideration. Okay, from there we have to deduct these things. Expenditure incurred wholly and exclusively in connection with such transfer. The written down value of the block asset concept I had explained you earlier. Written down value of the block at the beginning of the previous year. Then one more thing, actual cost of the asset falling within the block and acquired during the previous year. Okay, suppose in this previous year, suppose we are talking about assessment year 21-22. So previous year is 2021. In 2021, whatever asset is acquired in that block, that is one figure. WDV of the block at the beginning of the year means 1/4/2020. That is one thing. And the expenditure incurred wholly and exclusively for connection with the transfer. These three things taken together will be deducted to arrive at the short-term capital gain. Okay. Did you understand this? All these three items will be deducted. But however, you know, where all assets of the block are transferred during the previous year, or block itself ceases to exist, in that case, what will happen? The difference between sale value of the assets and the WDV of the block at the beginning of the previous year, together with the actual cost falling within the block of the asset acquired by the assessee during the previous year, shall be deemed to the capital gain. But already we have discussed it extensively. I will suggest you may refer to our previous video, video on tax planning and depreciation. There, this concept has been entirely explained. Okay, and one more thing, in case of power sector asset, right? The written down value of the asset shall be taken as cost of acquisition. This is one more thing. Now, one more thing, one more section we'll quickly learn it. May not be that important, but just keep an idea. Sometimes what happens? Businesses are transferred as a slump sale. Slump sale means not asset. The entire business is. Are you getting? Suppose individually you are acquiring something, you are acquiring some asset. But slump sale means the entire business is purchased. Okay, or one entire undertaking is purchased. In that case, how to know whether it is a long term? There might be some assets which are more than 36 months old. There are some assets which are just purchased. But in this case, when there is a slump sale, you have to see if the undertaking which is transferred is held for more than 36 months, it is long-term capital gain. But if it is held not more than 36 months, that is up to 36 months, then it is short-term capital gain. Okay. Then in this case, if business is acquired, what will be the cost of acquisition? Cost of acquisition will be net worth of the business. And this net worth has to be calculated by a chartered accountant. He has to certify this is the net worth of the undertaking, and that should be treated as the cost of acquisition in case of slumps. Okay, these two things are little technical things. But today, what we are going to learn is a little more important than that. It is about rate of tax. You already know capital gains are chargeable at different rate of tax. We need to first of all know what is long-term capital gain, is short-term capital gain. The tax rates are applicable and different. Okay, and there lies many elements of tax planning. If you classify a transfer as a particular type, let us say, if you can convert an asset short-term to long-term, then there may be some tax saving. Okay, so let us learn those concepts. This is about rate of tax on capital gain. So I'll be taking you to various sections. First of all, you already know how to classify asset as a short-term or long-term. Is it not? For these assets, securities other than units listed in recognized stock exchange, units of equity-oriented bond or units of UTI and zero coupon bond. If asset is held More than 12 months, then it is long term, otherwise short. In case of unlisted shares, land or building, if assets are held more than 24 months, then it is short term, then it is long term, otherwise it is short term. And in case of other assets and unlisted securities and units of debt oriented fund, if it is assets are held more than 36 months, then it is long term, otherwise it is short term. You know, this is how we classify. First, let us see what is the rate applicable to short term capital. Now you can see for that thing we have to refer to section 111A, which talks about short-term capital gain arising on transfer of listed securities, units of equity oriented fund, and units of business trust. What is the rate of tax? 15%. If security transaction tax has been paid, if STT is paid, the tax rate is 15%. If it is short-term capital gain arising out of listed equity shares. Okay. And it is also 15%, even though STT is not paid, in which situation short-term capital gain arising from transaction undertaken in a foreign currency on a recognized stock exchange located in an international financial services center. Okay, so that short-term capital gain, which is done in a foreign currency on a recognized stock exchange located in IFS, in that case also it is still 15%, even if STT is not paid. Okay, so for these assets it is only 15%. Otherwise, if asset is something else, let us say land and building, but it is shut down, then what we will do? Other capital asset at the normal rate. Normal rate means it varies. Suppose individual, you know, normal rate up to certain income it is 5%, then 20%, then 30%. Okay, or there is alternative scheme when there is 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, 25%, like this. So that normal rate is applicable to short-term capital assets. Are you getting? But for these assets, this kind of transfers, it is 15%, otherwise normal rate. Did you understand this rate for short-term capital gain? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now let us learn tax for long-term capital gain. First, let me cover you section 112A, then I'll go to 112 itself. 112A says long-term capital gain exceeding rupees 1 lakh on transfer of listed equity shares if STT has been paid. Okay, listed equity shares in STT has been paid. What is the rate of tax? Can you read it? What is the rate of tax?
10%.
10%. So long-term capital gain exceeding 1 lakh, only 10% is the tax. And it is also 10% if the transaction is undertaken in a recognized stock exchange located in IFSC and where transaction is taken place in foreign currency. In that case also, even if STT is not paid, same 10% is applicable. But when you are paying long-term capital gain, you know, indexation is applicable. Okay. But if you are paying this concessional rate, because normal rate of long-term capital gain is 20%. But if you are paying at 10%, then indexation will not be allowed. Without indexation, you can pay 10%. Okay. And for other long-term assets, like unlisted securities, let us say, unlisted securities are shares closely held, shares of a closely held company. Rate of tax is like this for non-corporate, non-resident foreign company, 10% without the benefit of indexation. For other assets, is 20%. So normally 20%. So in certain situation, it is 10%. And for listed securities, 10% without indexation, or 20% availing the benefit of indexation, whichever is more beneficial to the assessee. So assessee has to exercise his choice. You may pay 10%, but you will not do any indexation, or 20% with indexation. In indexation, what will happen? Cost of acquisition and cost of improvement will increase. It will go up. So assessee has to compute 10% without benefits, without indexation, or 20% with 10% without indexation, or 20% with indexation, which is beneficial. Accordingly, he will choose whichever is more beneficial to the assessee. That is the benefit. And for all other assets, that is the land and building, plant and machinery, etc., then rate is 20%. It's a long-term capital gain, it is 20%. And short-term capital gain, it is a normal rate. Did you understand these rates? These are the rates which are applicable on capital gain. And here, friends, you have to keep certain things in your mind that individuals, HUFs, if their basic exemption limit, you know, up to 2,50,000 is not exhausted. Okay, then long-term capital gain shall be reduced to that extent. That is only after that, whatever is the long-term capital gain, that will be taxable. It is for only for individual and HUF. The long-term capital gain taxable under section 112 and 112A, or short-term capital gain taxable under section 111A shall be reduced by unadjusted basic exemption. So whether it is a long-term capital gain or short-term capital gain, if the assessee's basic exemption limit is not exhausted and assessee is an individual or HUF, then this capital gains, whether long-term or short-term, shall be reduced to that extent. Okay. But friends, you have to remember, you know, chapter 60 deductions are available from income to arrive at the total income. But no deduction under chapter 60 can be claimed in respect of long-term capital gain chargeable under section 112 or 112A, or short-term capital gain chargeable under section 111A. That means this chapter 60 deduction is not applicable to any capital gain, whether long-term or short-term. There is a rebate which is called as 87A. As per that rebate, if your total income does not exceed 5 lakh rupees, then entire amount of tax is given to you as rebate. So consequently, no tax is payable. But you cannot get this rebate in respect of tax payable 10% on long-term capital gain under section 112A. 112A, you have seen long-term capital gain. If 12% rate is applicable, so 87A rebate is not applicable. And there is an enhanced surcharge of 25% and 37% would not be levied on dividend income. Okay, short-term capital gain chargeable to tax under section 111A, and long-term capital gain chargeable to tax under 112A. This surcharge, enhanced surcharge of this would not be levied on dividend income. So these are some additional points you just have to keep it in your mind. Okay, so what is important here, you should have keep in mind, a short-term capital gain can be taxed at the rate of 15%. Otherwise, it can be 15% only for few assets, right? Otherwise, it is a normal tax rate. Normal tax rate means what you have learned in our initial classes, 5%, 20%, 30%. Long-term capital gain can be taxed in certain situations, you see, 10%, right? And in certain situations, it may be 20%. Got some idea about rates of capital gain tax? Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is the rate applicable to capital gain. Okay, so now you see, suppose one asset is held for long term, for short term. Okay. Normal asset you can think of. Let us say about a land and building where 24 months, more than 24 months, if you hold, become long term. Suppose you are holding it for 23 months. The short term, you have to pay tax at the normal rate. Normal rate means maybe up to at the 30% also you may pay. But let us say you are holding it, just postponing the transfer for one more month. It will become a long term. In long term, you have to pay tax at 20%. So one can plan the time of transfer accordingly. Long-term capital gain, as you are saying, tax rate is low. So one would like to definitely prefer to convert a capital asset from short-term to long-term. Okay. Is it clear to you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you see, so far, all these things we have already understood. We have understood what is capital asset. how to classify them and short term and long term, what is transfer, what are the things which are not regarded the transfer, how to deal with depreciable asset. And we also know how to compute capital gain. Once you have computed capital gain, next thing is that you have to calculate tax payable on that. Now you know what is the tax, which is what is the rate of tax applicable to short-term capital gain, what is the rate of tax applicable to long-term capital gain. We know all these things. Is it? Now we'll be able to compute what is the capital gain. But friends, one more thing. These capital gains are subject to certain exemptions. So now we need to learn what are the exemptions available to capital gain. Okay, with that only, once we learn the exemption, then our planning will be complete. We'll be able to plan our capital gain if you know the exemption plan. Okay, so there are two categories of exemptions. I will be explaining you this thing. Give me 1 minute to share the slides with you. Now coming to exemptions. As you can see, one group of exemptions are related to Section 10. Section 10 provides these exemptions. Then there are other group of exemptions which are in Section 54 series. So many exemptions are there. Some of them are applicable to short-term capital gain. Some of them are applicable to long-term capital gain. So we should have some broad idea about this exemption. Okay. So today, let me tell you the exemptions under Section 10. Then maybe in the next session, we'll be covering the exemption under this 54 series. Now coming to Section 10, as you can see, there are three types of exemption. One is Section 1033, second is Section 1037, Section 1043. First 33 says, Section 1033, exemption of capital gain on transfer of unit scheme 1962. Okay, so if there is some transfer, some capital assets are transferred under unit scheme 1964, then that will be exempted. Okay, but such transfers should have taken place on or after 1/4/2002. If after this date some units are transferred under unit scheme 1964, then only it will be exempted. That you have to keep it in the mind. Second exemption is that exemption of capital asset on compulsory acquisition of agricultural land situated in specified urban limit. Right. So normally, you know, rural agricultural land are not capital asset. Is it not? We know that rural agricultural land depends, it depends upon the distance between the nearest municipality and that land. Okay, somewhere it is 2 kilometers, somewhere it is 6 kilometers, somewhere it is 8 kilometers. We know that it depends upon the population of the municipality. Rural agricultural land is not a tax, a capital asset. Urban agricultural land, you know, that is a capital asset, and if you transfer urban agricultural land, that will be capital gain. But this exemption is that urban capital gain, agricultural land, but which is compulsorily acquired. If it is compulsorily acquired, it's not transferred, but government has acquired it compulsorily, then there will be exemption. Okay, are you getting? Because it will cause a lot of hardship to the people. It is agricultural land which is situated in the urban place, right? In case capital gain arising to the individuals or HUA on transfer of such agricultural land by way of compulsory acquisition shall be exempt. But if they voluntarily transfer, that is not exempt. But if they are compulsorily acquired, urban agricultural land, if compulsorily acquired, that will result in capital gain or capital loss. Okay, but such enhanced compensation, enhanced compensation may be received on or after 1/4/2004. After that, if it is received after that only, it will be exempted. But one more thing, one have to prove that the urban agricultural land must have been used for agricultural purposes during preceding 2 years. They should have been used for agricultural purposes in preceding 2 years. If it is idle, if it is vacant, or it is used for commercial purposes, then it is not urban agricultural land. It's not agricultural land. Okay, if it is used for agricultural purpose in the preceding 2 years, either by the individual himself or by his parent or by the HUF. If it is used, then it is an urban agricultural land, and if it is transferred by way of compulsory acquisition, it will be exempted. Okay. And third exemption you already know. I had explained you the concept of reverse mortgage in some of our initial classes. Right. So reverse mortgage means, suppose normally it is used by senior citizens. So they they reverse mortgage their asset, let us say house, land, building, to a bank, and bank gives them money, either a lump sum or periodically pension kind of thing they give to the senior citizen. Okay, and after the end of certain period or the death of the person, the bank will acquire that property. Right. So the amount received by a senior citizen as a loan, uh, either in a lump sum or in installments on a transactions of reverse mortgage, is also exempt. They are also exempt from capital gain tax. Okay, so if you summarize this, the exemption under section 10, there are three exemptions you have got. Okay, one is under unit scheme transfer, second is urban agricultural land compulsorily acquired, and the land which have been used by the individual HUF or their parents for agricultural purposes for immediately 2 preceding years. Second thing is that money received by in lump sum or installments by the senior citizen in a reverse mortgage transaction. They are also exempt. Okay, so these are one category of exemption we have covered. Okay, other category of exemption, that's section 54 series, that will be learning subsequently. Is it clear up to this?
Yes, sir.
Maybe a few more classes may be required to cover it. We'll be finishing that thing. Any query you have? Hope no doubt is there. Okay, so